Welcome to another session of Focus on Liberia. I am your co-host Gabriel. Today I'm in the studio with Jimmy, and we have actually you're not a special guest.
Right
uh,
now,
we
today, before.
we have a very special discussion today on. I think we did a part one of the dual currency, but today what we'd like to do is maybe go into the historical context of it. We want to look at the trade aspect of it. We want to look at the debt, all of those things that impacted, that led up to the country enacting a dual currency. So we want to dive a little deeper into that aspect of it and maybe get a better understanding of why the country made the decision to go to dual currency. And then maybe in the last part of the show, maybe talk about whether it's still necessary to have dual currency and if there's a need to move away from dual currency into a single currency. Um, Again, I have in the studio with me today Percy. Percy is a good buddy. I know he been here plenty of time, but it's good to have you back on with us today to really look at this historical context of it and maybe get a better clarity as to why we are where we are today with this dual currency. So, Percy, welcome. It's good to have you back.
Um, thank you, Gabby. Thanks, Jimmy. Nice to meet you. Um, I'm glad to be here. I hope we can have a educational discussion. I
Yeah,
watched the first part of this show with the panelists, and it was enlightening. But I thought um we needed to add a little more context so that we get a fuller picture of what has obtained the country and where we are now, and
you're
what
right.
place are where we are as a country, and some of those themes from back then, from the historical aspect, that are still prevailing today
Hmm.
in our contemporary space in Liberia. And
Right.
so hopefully we can have a great discussion. And I'm looking forward to the interaction with you and Jimmy, but most especially from the people watching online. Hopefully they can glean a thing or two from our discussion today.
Perfect. Perfect. Jimmy, I know
Yeah, this
you quarterback us, but this is going to be a very good discussion. So I want to hear your thought before we dive right in.
I mean it's important for us to know how we got where we are.
Yeah.
Liberia is not the only country that uses the U.S. dollar, but
Hmm.
our historical ties to the U.S. puts us in a kind of unique position. And there are arguments for and against going to another, Liberian currency. So if we inform our audience, inform our people, then they can
Yeah.
be able to make, argument whether it is good to keep the dollar as it is, or
Hmm.
we should move toward de-dollarization of our economy. So it's
Yeah.
a very important topic.
Yeah. No, thank you. I agree. Um, but before we dive in, if you're watching us wherever you are, please, I know we came out a little late, but take a moment, share, and invite other people to watch with you. And as I always say, we always like to say here, bring your comments, your opinions. We value opinion and perspective most importantly, and let's have a good discussion about the history of the dual currency in Liberia. So, Percy, without further ado, I know you mentioned earlier that you watched the first session of it. So could you maybe give us a little historical context in terms of uh, the how do you call it? I don't want to you want to call it. I don't know if I want to refer to it as duality of debt and trade policy colliding that led to you know where we are today, but just give us a little back history of the country at the time.
So yeah, thank you. So just a perspective, right? Because this place that is Liberia now, people tend to start this conversation from 1847.
Right.
This place was in existence before 1847. There were people there. There were people inhabit there were inhabitants there, and those people were actually carrying on everyday life, which includes economics, social. There was a whole society that the settlers met there. So
Mhm.
question then becomes, well, how these people were living before the settlers? What kind of economic activities were they engaged in, and what were the medium of exchange, right? What
Mhm.
kind of, in layman terms, what kind of money they were using, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
so so in the region as it is, the place that became Liberia for the most part, where the people there were, you have producers, where you have middlemen, right? And they were trading, they were regularly trading for the initial for from the beginning in the 16th centuries and stuff like that. The trade took them northwards, right? What we call the trans-Sahara trade, right?
Mhm.
So people were trading mostly. They would have Arab traders come down to the forest region, and they would exchange goods and services, right? And whatnot. And then as we move to the 18th century, the advent of the slave trade, slave trade in full swing right now, and so those indigenous community now became looking down to the coast, right? They were more inclined to come down to the coast to interact with Europeans that were coming to get goods and services to take back, and so that was the local economy as it was in a nutshell, right? People
Right.
produce stuff, they bring it down to the coast to sell. They exchange their goods and services. In terms of exchange, what they were using, um, the region that is now Liberia, one of the oldest medium of exchange there was the Kisi bar. We call it, when we read history, we call it Kisi penny, but it was the Kisi bar mostly that was used pervasively in that area that became Liberia, right? So
Right.
that was the nature of the economy before the settlers came in, right? By the time the settlers came in, also they met those medium of exchange in place, and they even participated in it also. Besides the kissy penny, there were barter, right? People use barter
Barter system. Yeah.
to do transactions, right? You
Yeah.
give me cola, I give you salt, and
Yeah.
stuff like that, back and forth. So that was the medium of exchange. And so by the time the settlers also came, the settlers came from America, and they met these things in place, and to a large extent they participated in it also. But they also brought some new things. They also brought some new ideas, new things also to the coast. One of the things they brought. So by the time you came, when a family came, the way it was set up, when a family came to Liberia, depending on what kind of colonization society sent you to Liberia, and I'm using Liberia broadly
In
because
general.
it's not
Right.
just Monrovia. People went to Grand Bassa, people went to Greenville and
Yeah.
whatnot. So depending on, because eventually those places became Liberia, right? So depending what kind of colonization society sent you, each colonization society had their own kind of token, right? And they had their own vouchers, right? They would give you tokens or vouchers, and those were to be used for the first 6 months. You can go and get stuff from there, because they had the place there for goods and services. You can go to those, they call it stores, right? You can go to those stores and get you goods and services to maintain you and the family for the first 6 months. And after
Right.
that 6 month rations elapse, you on your own, you have to go make farm, you have to get back, you know what I mean? So those were the first inklings of medium of exchange that we saw pre Liberia,
Entry. Right.
pre-republic, before the Republican era, right? Yeah,
Right.
something along those lines. Before the Republican era, those were the medium of exchange that was in place, right? And it's interesting to note also that what we know today to be a particular currency circulating in a particular political unit did not happen until 1854, right? So prior to 1854, right, you can take, or you can take any kind of money and go to any kind of place, and it will float against the currency that it meets there based on stability and perception. Simple
Right.
as that. If people perceive that currency to be stable and perceive it to be secure, that's what they're gonna cleave to, right? And that's how it was. So you have what is now Liberia and other regions of West Africa and whatnot. You had that kind of like free flowing currency in,
Right.
in those areas. So they were competing against one another. But yeah, so that was the nature of what happened when the settlers came and what became Liberia. But I'll pause here.
So, was there a dominant currency or a barter system that people use, even though like I can come with my own IOU note, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Jimmy can come with his. Based on Jimmy credibility, people might gravitate towards his, or
Mm-hmm.
based on mine, or maybe lack of thereof. People, my currency may not be used, widely as other people use Jimmy's, right? But was there a dominant currency that people gravitated towards because of one, the individuals behind it, two, the stability behind our currency and its ability to hold its weight in that time.
Yeah. So now several things here, right? So yeah, there were there were stronger currencies in that era. So you have to think about the people that came from America, right? Most of them came with capitals, and those capital they came with money from America. So they brought money with them from America, and
Mhm.
by and large, the United States dollar had a reputation at that time. I don't know if it was that strong, but it had a reputation. And one of the and then around Liberia also was the British. So the British pound sterling was also in and around Liberia. So there was one of the currencies that was readily in the boundaries of Liberia. There was also for the slave trade, the Portuguese used some crescent-shaped silver or gold coins called melinas, right? So they were associated with the slave trade, and then for groundnuts and stuff like that, they had the 5 cent French franc were
Yeah,
associated with that. So those were the primary in terms of what we call money today now, right? Those were the primary currency, but there were other sub currencies there also. It doesn't mean that so because if people came from Portugal to trade, they would bring the Portuguese money with them. So there were, but within that area, the pervasive monetary unit that was used there at the time was mostly well known would be the pound sterling. Um, after wars now. That was the pound
right,
sterling, the US dollar, because people came with capital from the United States. So the
right.
US dollar, and there was trader also coming from the United States to trade on what is now Liberia. So there was the United States dollars, there was pound sterling because British were also involved in that area. Also, there was pound sterling, there was francs, right? That we know today, right? Those were the top currencies there. But then there was also the indigenous ones, also like the kissy penny, the cola nuts, all right, the salt and whatnot. So those things all made up the monetary unit of what became Liberia at the
Exchange,
time.
right, right. Jimmy.
Yeah, yes, just similar to what Percy is saying here. Just imagine, Liberia. They were used to trading Liberia before the coming of the migrants from the U.S.
Mhm.
and they were trading. The British were around the zone, and so a lot of the trading was in British sterling. But I want you to also know that the Kisi pound was also being used. I don't know if our audience, I can show you quickly what it looked like so they could
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
see the
that'll
kissy
be
bar.
different.
Yeah, show them the kissy bar.
Yeah, let me do that, and I'll show them quickly. So you see this long piece of, if
Yeah,
you've seen it, that is the Kisi pound there that was used for circulation in Liberia. This was legal tender,
that
and
was
all
legal
these,
tender.
yeah.
yes, and all these were coins, British sterling coins as well.
Wow.
So, yep, that's how it was. So,
I think I got plenty of those laying around. Maybe I should try to.
so
Wow, that's
they
interesting.
when they JJ Robert thought it was wise that they have their own money. So initially, the American Colonial Society had printed some notes for them that they were supposed to use, but with the Declaration of Independence, J.J. Roberts and his cohorts so thought it wise to make their own money. So they started printing Liberian dollars, not no longer using the American Colonial Society notes that they had. But as you will know, after time, the Liberian dollar had to compete with the existing currencies, like the
Right.
Kisi, like the sterling. They had to compete. And eventually, after printing a whole lot of notes, the Liberian dollar started losing value. So it became increasingly hard for the Liberian government to pay their debts. goods started getting more and more expensive, and it rose to a point that they decided to go ahead and use the British sterling, like Percy was talking about. They
Right.
adopted the British sterling because that was the strongest currency in the area. So they adopted the British sterling. This was in early 1900s. But after when the war happened, the British sterling took a serious fall. It dropped against the U.S. dollar.
Right.
So with the help of the U.S., like that's when Liberia adopted the U.S. dollar, and from there, from I was in 1943, they just started using the U.S. dollar. So that's pretty much how we got here.
Okay.
Now, I think we'll probably want to know what is the value of money. How does money get its value,
Right.
to understand why we can't just print our own money.
Right. So without trying to drag this thing on, because you have to. So I'm looking at what is happening currently, right, in the financial markets with the advent of crypto,
Mhm.
Ethereum, and all these cryptocurrency. Yet there's still the US dollars and all the other currency, right? Now, I know you guys show me that Kishi bar. So that was existing before the printing of the Liberian dollar. Now, the question that I have for both of you is, how did, let's say, what I said earlier, imagine I have maybe 100 Kishi bar laying here that I know I can use to exchange. All of a sudden, both of you come in and print your money. How do you replace my Kishi bar with the current money you guys just, how did they do that back then where you don't just come and undervalue my currency, but in a way, kind of gradually allow people with Kisi bars as a mode of exchange to change it into the new currency. Was that any system like that that happened back then to both of you that you guys are aware of? Because I think if not, it will create some kind of tension, right? It will create some kind of tension because somebody come, they have a mode of exchange, and you just come and say, "Hey, that is now obsolete," and they thought there was value to that, to those currency they have.
Right.
So how did that, did the advent of the new
Well, it
currency
goes
kind of
back.
merge into?
It goes back. What gives money its value?
Right,
Money is a medium of exchange,
right.
but we have to agree
That
on
that
that
is
this thing gets value.
right,
You can have pile up. It could be just a pile of toilet tissue for some people. Some money where people look at it and say, "What kind of money is that?" For them, it has no value at all.
but that
So
was before
money,
the fiat currency, though. Back then, currency were backed by.
yeah, even before it was back, it had to be agreed
Mhm.
that this thing has such a value. And the way
Right,
that came about, if you present that thing to somebody, they will give you something in exchange because it's value to them. But if person, you present that thing to that person, and the person said, "No, I don't even want it," or "It doesn't have very much value to me," then it loses. During the war, on a little sidetrack, during the war, you couldn't buy some things as food in money. Nobody wanted money. Nobody, even U.S. notes, they wanted rice. I remember trying to one time I went to buy fish on to Nukutan there during the war, and a woman refused any kind of money. She only wanted rice. So that's the essence of money. What is in conceptually what the person consider its value. So when come back to the key issue, at one point it was agreed that this thing, once you got it, once you had it, it was value certain thing. I would give you my corn, I would give you my plantain. And those days, oil, palm oil used to be one of Liberia's main exports, all even before the coming of the migrants to
yeah,
this country,
yeah.
to Liberia, and oil was its value. So when you give me a Daikisi coin, I will give you X amount of oil, or I will give you cloth, or I will give you salt, or whatever, pepper. So once once it's understood by the parties who are trading with each other
Mhm.
that this thing is worth it, then that would give it value. So now you ask, how did it start getting exchanged out? Well, again, after some time, people say, no, I don't want this Kisi thing because I can't get that much from it. But the pound sterling was heavy, was strong because the British would honor their dollar and they would give you, you could buy goods from them, imported goods, you could buy things. So you can imagine why the pound sterling started getting stronger and stronger, because you could buy exported, imported things from them. And
Yeah.
that's why it started taking more and more value and became the dominant currency.
Yeah. Percy, before we jump into the
Yeah, I think
different.
Jimmy
Right.
Jimmy laid the foundation for that already. So
Right.
again, it's about perception, right? Like what people perceive something to be, right? There are certain. So, for example, for the indigenous people, they took their goods, brought it to the coast to sell, right? And they want to import their goods for whatever they were giving up, right? So if I bring you cola nuts, that means I want cloth to carry back to the interior. That's what value in the interior, right? That's what the perceived value is in the interior. So if I give cola nut, if they're using cola nuts in Europe to make some other product, right? It's value in Europe. That's the perceived thing. That's what the European wants, and the African wants probably something else, right? A textile cloth or something to carry back. Maybe a musket. Yeah, you need something like that, right? So perceived value. But then at a certain point in time, everybody can carry cloth, everybody can carry cola nuts, everybody. So
Right.
they started to figure out something else have to be this intermediary, which that's what money is, right?
Right.
This intermediary medium in which that I can give you this thing here, you can hold it, you can go get something else, but you can give me the goods still. But this thing is valued because
Yeah.
you can use it to get something else. So that's the idea behind what the perceived value of money, right? Is all in what we perceive the money to be. The US dollar is highly valuable to us because of the perceived value, right?
Right.
And the perceived value comes from the fact that the United States has a strong economy, right?
Right.
Developed financial markets, all those trappings that comes with it, right?
Right.
So people have faith and trust in the United States dollar. It's something similar to what our people was doing there, right? People have the Kisi bar might be looking just like an iron, but people have faith in it, right? As that intermediary that people can use to go get whatever they want in time. Maybe at a particular time you might not need that thing, but you have the money, but you have that Kisi bar, and you can use it to get your thing later on. That's what it is, right? So it's all about the perceived value, what people perceive that medium of exchange to be.
So, quick tangent question from both of you. Do we have any museum in Liberia where we can actually see those things?
No, unfortunately,
No.
no, they don't. And
Jesus.
those are the things that you see, and those are the things we're supposed to save for posterity, and it,
Right.
it, it
Right.
helps future generation to understand things as opposed to what my uncle told me down the line, right?
Right.
And your
Right.
uncle voice is not just good enough. You have to have some kind of backing, right? So we don't have those things in Liberia. There used to be a place where I think correct me if I'm wrong, Jimmy. There was a what you call it before,
Wow.
where they keep historical documents at.
The archive.
There was an archive there right where the law library is on Ashmont Street, I think.
Right.
But I don't know if they're still using it for that purpose anymore. But that's where it used to be. And they have few documents there. They have a couple of things that you could go and see. But it was not given the age of Liberia and how long Liberia have been in existence, right? There was not much there to like conjure people to come and see and to generate funds and whatnot for.
Because those are great historical. Without going on a tangent here, I was in Togo. They have a history of the not just all the, I think, six not 16, 62 tribe, 42 tribes that are in Togo. Everyone is represented in that museum, and you can see like the tool that they used to hunt, how they used to feed themselves, and all of those things. For us, I think that those would have been like, especially that Kisi bar and any other mean of exchange we use in Liberia could have been, in some kind of great library or museum in Liberia that people can really check out to understand the context of some of these things.
You
Yeah.
see, the reason I'm just I'm gonna let Jimmy come in and make he's the older guy
Go
here. He
ahead.
might know, but part of the reason is people they tend to pass Liberia history like like cut it into pieces and make it seem like, oh, that your history, we don't care
Yeah.
time for it, and and that's what, and it doesn't bring about nationalism or unity in the country. So
Right.
certain people see what we're talking about here as well, the American Liberian people history or the Kisi people history. So they're not interested in that. But in and of itself, it's Liberia history. You need these are the things that make up Liberia. The fact those little nuggets of history
Yeah.
that we're talking about here. This is what makes us Liberian. This is why me and you can be professionals in this country, right? We can work at the highest level in corporate America, but I don't feel American at the end of the day. I feel Liberian. I
Exactly.
spend the same amount of time I live as in Liberia. I've lived the same amount of time here, but
Yeah.
I still feel Liberian. I don't feel
Yeah.
American. My children might feel American, but I
Right.
don't. And
Yeah.
that's the thing, right? People don't understand these things, right? It's not about what tribe you're from and why not, but what make you who you are,
Hmm.
right? And until we can have a holistic approach to our national history, where it's not
Right.
about, oh, that you didn't want or that I didn't want or the game casting, but to tell the story as it is, right? The
Right.
chips with four where it's four, but tell
Right.
the story as it is and create something there so that next generation of people coming can
We'll
see it,
see.
can
Right.
feel it, can
Exactly.
touch it, and they
Right.
can have pride in this country here. But I leave it to Jimmy.
Yeah. Jimmy, you have any follow up on that before we dive into the next question that I have? Maybe.
Yeah, we did try to have a couple of museums prior to the war, and I think there is a museum. But I like the point Percy stretches. You know, every country has gone through some different periods, some of
Yeah.
strife, war, famine, some famines, and all. And they are able to, when they come out of it, they're able to look back at it, not with disdain, but rather to learn
Hmm.
how they evolved to where they are today. Because once you are able to know your history, then you will know who you are and where you got, how you got here today. We a lot of times our people denigrate our history,
Hmm.
and
Mhm.
all Liberians should be against that because it is reducing our value when we
Right.
denigrate our own history. There are things that we have progressed and learned from that other countries benefited from. All
Hmm.
right, our journey, and so we need to approach it with that new understanding that the way we see things today were not the way they were back then, and understand that things that people did, like let's give an example with women. Women a long time ago were considered property. They were not giving the same
Right.
recognition as a
Right.
man.
Yeah.
So when you hear that this person had several wives, and then you look down on it because the person had several wives, or 30 or some more wives, then you try to condemn it. No, you that was the period of time
Yep.
that was accepted.
Right.
And we shouldn't look at it in a judgmental way, but understanding how was one man able to keep, how was one chief able to have so many wives.
Right.
You'll find out that was part of his wealth.
Yeah.
His children and his wives was part of his wealth. He could have a farm. He could, if he could have plantations, just because of his
The number of children he
family.
has and family.
So
Right.
we have a lot of history that we
Right.
kind of look down on, and sometimes our history, we have to also be careful, because if our history is being told by the oppressors, the conquerors,
Hmm.
the imperialists,
Yeah.
they're not going to give us
The
a good.
accurate picture. Right.
Yeah, they will look down, or they discredit anything that we tried to do. Whereas we, Liberia, survived through colonialism when they were butchering up Africa, these
Hmm.
giant European countries with all kinds of might and wealth. Liberia
Hmm.
survived that. Liberia survived when they were practically abandoned by the USA. They really just wanted to get rid of some people, but they had to survive. With all
Hmm.
that, we're a surviving people, and we did it together. We should not even look at it like, oh, that was the settler group, or no, 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 no.
Mhm.
Liberia could not survive. The settler could not survive if without the indigenous people
That's true. Yeah,
joining
yeah,
with them
yeah,
to
yeah,
keep this nation alive. It
yeah.
Yeah,
was
yeah, yeah,
it was a joint effort that kept
Mm-hmm.
made
Mm-hmm.
Liberia that sovereign place that where people didn't have could be safe. They didn't they when
Mm-hmm.
if you're running from colonialism, if you're running from slavery, there was a haven that you
yeah,
could go
yeah,
to. So they painted as if it was we were not doing anything good instead of painting it as a survival history of
yeah.
African people
All right.
despite the colonialism. So
I, I like the way you paint it because I think we need to put it in a light because it will kind of give strength to the next generation that come in as opposed to, hey, this is just a country that just survived, but that just
thank
went
you.
through colonialism, but they survived through it. They fought together and made it through it,
Right.
as opposed to being this thing, looking
And
at it as
mind
this thing.
you, they were told that it couldn't survive,
Yeah,
and they did everything so we couldn't survive.
yeah,
Look at the first loan we took from Great Britain. I
yeah,
will just give you an idea. We
yeah,
took a $500,000 loan from Great Britain.
yeah,
America will always claim America, our big brother. We stepped. America didn't do anything
mhm,
for us. After the initial colonial society sent the people over, that was it. So they weren't even recognized in Liberia.
mhm,
So Liberia needed a loan to expand, to go in the
yeah,
interior, to build
yeah,
infrastructure, to build schools, to build trade. And the British agreed to give Liberia $500,000. But at the end of that agreement, only 75,000 of the 500,000
I
ever,
read that. I read that. I got.
yeah, ever reached our
And
hand.
it reached by the time it got there, and
It was only
everything was gone,
75,000. So
gone.
what had taken all this other money? Then we have to pay, and it was at an
I
exorbitant
think it was
rate.
7%. I think it was at 7%, if I recall
Yeah,
correctly.
it was very, very high at the time.
Yeah, yeah,
So it was
uh,
all intended to strangle Liberia.
yeah,
So we would collapse as a nation, so we could easily be taken over by the British Empire. But it did not happen.
yeah.
We still survived, regardless of all that. So we have a lot to be proud of,
Right.
and if we don't tell our history, we have call yeah, who always comes on. If we don't tell our history the right way, our children will not appreciate who they are. And
Yeah.
if you don't believe in who you are, then you're not going to understand your
To
greatness and
understand the
where you
future,
need to go.
right? Yeah. No, thank you for. I think we went off a great tangent there, but um, I, I'm glad you brought up the loan aspect of it, which is part of debt. So we will get into that aspect of it. But um, Percy, I want you to talk about I know you talked about some of the trade aspect of, how the barter system, the mode of exchange used to work back then. But I think there was a way of trying to maintain stability during that time as well, even up to now. That led us to going the dual currency route. But let's look at the fight to maintain stability during that time. That was taking place at that time. Can you give us a little back history on that?
So by the time the American Liberians came, let me just some by the time the American Liberians came, they started to assert themselves, right? They got to
Right,
be assertive in the region, right?
right,
Um, by 1822, right? These guys, imagine that these guys came from America, where white people thought they were superior, and now you in our own African soil, so they felt this is our place here, right? This is our place. This is our place. These are all kind of people here. We might not be culturally the same, similar, but it's a black man. I'm a black man, so this place
right.
is for us. Africa is not for the white, for the white man, it's for us. So they started to assert themselves in certain ways, right? As far as economically, right? So, for example, by the time they got there, one of the first um promulgation was that by Juhudi Ashman, right? Ashman, if you remember Juhudi Ashman, who was very instrumental in the formation of what is now Liberia, the
Yeah.
colony of Monrovia, so to speak. Ashburn was the first person. He was the first colonial agent there on the ground, and he issued a circular that said they were prohibiting all foreign ships from trading with the settlement of Monrovia, right? So what these guys wanted to do, they wanted to create an economic space for themselves also, right?
Right.
You
Right.
can't dominate us in our own area, right? We have to have a say here. This is our home, right? This is our place. So they were trying to create an economic space for themselves by exerting themselves in a certain way. So they said, so the circular was no foreigner cannot just come here and just trade here, right? If you
Hmm.
want to trade, we have to have specific places for you, right? We have to have, just as America is today, you have port of entries here, right? You don't
Yeah.
just fly any international flight from anywhere and just land here. You
And
either
just
land
land.
at JFK,
Right.
LAX, O'Hare, Harriet,
Right.
what's the place in Atlanta? Harvey Jackson.
Yeah.
So those were port of entries. These are port of entries into the United States. You don't just fly to any airport here, right? So it was
Right.
something along those lines that the migrants were trying to say, right? You can just come here like that. You have to come to a certain place here and trade at a certain place here because they were asserting themselves. You can bring your big ships and then what leaves for what going to be left for us because they wanted to be part of this trade. You have to understand the ACS too were not just the ACS. They were
Yeah.
they were complicit in trading, right? Because one of the things Ashman said was that it would take a longer time for money to come from America to replenish what they have here as opposed to doing it locally. So he
Right.
decided to take the initiative to stack up locally for the colonists to have uh, um, um, supplies, right?
Right.
So one of
Right.
the things he did actually, so it was so this whole prohibiting and asserting himself, being assertive in that particular space started to take shape, right? So by 1822 he was prohibiting foreigners. By 1826 he was re-emphasizing that foreigners can trade here with the
Yeah.
first they said you can trade here with the port of with the settlement of Monrovia. Then they went further. They said you can trade here with just in Monrovia or along anywhere that we occupy, but you can directly trade with the natives here also, right?
Yeah.
So they started to restrict trade, right? And then it went on and on. Every year, it was actually re-emphasizing and adding to these restrictions, right?
Hmm.
You have to think about it. The guys that were leading Liberia also, they were also complicit in the trade, right? They were people who had businesses. They were either having commission businesses, right? They were either having ships that were moving goods and services along the coast. So it was their livelihood also, and so they were against competition from a bigger, from guys from bigger economy who have more
Right.
bigger ships and whatnot, and so they had to carve out a space for them economically that would be that they can also thrive, right? And so that's where you see all these different restrictions are actually culminated into the port of entry law that actually passed in 1864 that
Hmm.
actually restricted trade to certain ports to certain specific port along what was Liberia back then, right?
Hmm.
So that was it, and that's how they exerted themselves. Now, in terms of the stability of the currency,
Right.
right? By the time Liberia passed, declared independence, she issued her first currency, which was the Liberian dollar. It started
Hmm.
off 1 to 1, right? One Liberian dollar to one American dollar, so to speak. So it was 1 to 1 for a considerable period of time.
Hmm.
The government used to print money, but the money they used to print, that was what me and you talk about, right? It was cheaper to print the Liberian dollar. The Liberian dollar had more value. So economically, we call it a synchronous,
Tenorish.
correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Tenorish.
so
Right.
that so it added to the Liberian budget, right? So
Yeah.
we have money to spend. So things were not that bad in the beginning. By 1860s is when the printing started. Is when this what the printing of money started, and it's interesting because why would Liberia why would the government start printing money all of a sudden in 1860 so much to the extent that it would ruin the Liberian dollars? Well, something happened a few years before that.
Hmm.
The Marylanders joined Liberia.
Yeah.
Maryland joined Liberia in 1857.
Yeah.
People don't understand that. That was a very costly. That was a very costly union there. That union was very costly for Liberia, right?
How so?
And um,
Why? Why was it costly?
it was very costly because one, there was no standing army at the time, right? to go respond to any kind of insurrection from the indigenous people and whatnot, you have to raise a militia, right? To raise a militia, you have to pay them, you have to give them supplies and whatnot.
Yeah.
Those were actual costs to
Yeah.
Liberia. It was not going to Maryland. It was to Liberia. Even though Maryland said Liberia said you should indemnify us. That's a big word for saying you will pay up by at some point,
Yeah.
right? You indemnify us, but Liberia had to bear the cost, the immediate cost of that union, that annexation of Maryland, cost Liberia a lot, and to pay those expenses that the government incur, she's had to print money. There was nowhere else to do. Even though she had done it before when it was now, but she had to print it in larger amounts now, right? Because the conflict with the people of Maryland, with the indigenous people of Maryland, was a big one, right? There were several tribes that were coming together. It was not just one small group. There were several tribes that were coming together, and they really needed Liberia help. So you had to raise an army to go there, a Malaysian army to go there, and so that was very costly to Liberia. And that's the point. That's the exact point in history, because when you look back, like, okay, everything okay, yeah, why are they printing money in 1860? Well,
Right.
it was a few years back they had to pay for those costs that they incurred with the stuff from Maryland. So that's why they started printing money, and then the credibility of the Liberian dollar started to be ruined by 1860, going all the way into the 60s and going forward. We started having these problems, and we can talk about them bit by bit as we go on, right? But we started having these problems.
Wow. So was 1860 the first and only time we print money, or did we print money subsequently several times, a few other time after that?
We
Because if and the reason why I'm asking, if we print money in the 60s, in
Mhm.
1860, to indemnify the Union of Maryland to Liberia,
To
and
support the war
right,
effort. There was a war
to
going on.
you're right, to support the war effort, right?
Yeah.
Not mean that maybe we miscalculated the strength of our economy, and we didn't know that the currency that we put in the economy, our economy couldn't support it, which is fine. But do did that happen subsequently through several years, that gradually, in terms of,
Yeah,
I won't call it
yeah.
dominic effect, that led to the deterioration in our currency?
1860 was not the only time that we printed money. We
Right.
were printing money from the beginning of the country, right? Like I told you, silver age purposes were doing it, but the effects, right? The effects on the economy wasn't grave, right? Well, we
Hmm.
didn't start to feel
At
the
the time,
effects,
right.
right?
Right.
The Liberian dollar was depreciated, but it was not depreciating at the rate at which it started to depreciate after 1860 or at 1860,
Right.
right? It almost like you flooding the market now, and then people start again. We're talking about perception here now, right?
Right. Right.
So,
Right.
like, bro, not just when we say printing money, I hope people don't think about it like just money printing. So, the Liberian government started to issue debt also. That's money, right? That's in economy. That's M2, the M1, M2. So you put them together. So debt or your regular money, right? So that's M2. So they expanded the money supply basically by
Right.
issuing debt, and also, right? So they started to expand the money supply. They had to raise these money. They had to raise it through the local market. And one of the ways the Liberian government went to raise money was through local mercantile houses, right? So we talk about how the Liberian asserted themselves, said no European trader can trade on it.
Right.
So in order for the European to trade there, you have to have a Liberian front, right? A Liberian representative has to be there, right? So this is how guys like John Lewis, I mean, what is his name? Lord Carey and these other guys. This is how they made their money. They were
Right.
actually working in merchant houses and get
Right.
commissioners, right? They were paid on commission from working in these houses. That's how they got rich from it, right? So, and this is where the Liberian government went to raise these debt, right? And based
You
on
know,
perception again, what we
let
talk
me let
about,
me come in quickly. I like
uh-huh.
I like the way you phrase it, and I think it's a perfect way for a layman, somebody who don't know, who hasn't studied economics, to look at money. When a country issues money, they are like issuing a debt. You give somebody Liberian dollar, like the central bank give you, take $500 and give it to you. Did that mean they owe you a debt?
Mm-hmm. That's
So
how we
the
use.
more money you are starting to print, the more and more debt you're getting into. And how you would pay the debt? Okay, how are you planning to pay the debt? Well, just what Percy was saying, they have to find a way to raise revenue to be able to pay the debt. When the people come back, when the people bring and present the money, they have to pay that debt back. So whenever you think about why we can't just print money, well, when we print money, we owe people. How do we plan to pay the people back? Has to be there. And if the people don't think you will pay them back, they will not accept your money, or they will reduce the value of your money.
Yes,
So
that's exactly
that's
what it is.
an important concept there. Yeah.
Yes, so that's exactly what happened. So these debt, when they were issued at deep discount at the mercantile houses, right? They straight up they would discount the Liberian debt and give them a fraction of what it was worth, right? Based on perception, the Liberian government credit and whatnot, right? So they would deeply discount these debts, right? But in terms of paying them for tariff, because these same houses, remember now, are businesses, and that's how the Liberian government raised revenue by issued by tariffs on their goods and services, right? And when the time came to pay the Liberian government their taxes or tariffs or whatever, how we want to term it, they were actually paying at par value. So, mind you, the Liberian government will issue you debt, right? You will discount the debt, but when it's time for you to pay the man back, he issued the man anything at full price, and this is why I'm paying you. So this is where the struggle was, right? So the Liberian government were always cash strapped because the Liberian dollar had devalued, and the taxes that they were getting wasn't worth anything. So they were always issuing new debt into the market.
Yeah. And Jimmy, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I mean, we can. So that's how we got where we are, and a similar thing happened when we adopted the sterling. When the story that person narrates, the Liberian dollar went so low that it was not worth printing anymore. They say we're going to use sterling, but when we started using the British monetary units as our exchange rate, another problem came later. When the war happened, the British sterling went down. Now, all our debt after the war happened, remember we got in debt now. We're in debt to the U.S. later on. The U.S. bailed us out of the first British debt. The Firestone came in and whatnot. They bailed us out. So now our debt is in U.S. But all our taxes and revenue, we're collecting it in what? Sterling. So when the sterling started going down, it became more and more expensive to pay the debt because the debt was in U.S. So we said, wait, this sterling is going down. Last week we could take 50 sterling and pay $10 debt, U.S. debt. Now it's only 25. We need 100 sterling to pay the same $25 debt. We don't need the sterling anymore. Let's change it. When with the aid of the U.S. government, we were able to switch our currency over to the U.S. currency. Now, I know Percy is going to get that, but I'm going to introduce it. When you do not issue your own currency, it takes away your ability to form monetary policies and even fiscal policies. But I will let Percy go on. In other words, the things that you can do now, because you don't get money, you can get your own money.
You don't have.
You can't do them again anymore now because you don't have. It cripples your monetary policy.
Right. So, quick question. Maybe you guys should. Was it pegged at the time? Was it pegged to the sterling or the U.S. dollar, or did we?
It was pegged physically in the beginning.
Were we physically using those currency in the market?
In the beginning, there was some sort of pegging there, right?
It was pegged. Okay.
Right. There was some sort of pegging that made it 1-to-1 when it was issued.
Right.
But then again, like I said, the over issue and flooding the market with debt led to that devaluation in the currency. But we talk about these things. This is just at the policy level, me and you and Jimmy is talking about. But think about what happened to the ordinary person, right?
Right.
This is what happened in Liberia today. Certain things people don't take Liberian dollar for it, right? They want US dollars for their goods and services. It was no different back then, right? Think about it. There's high inflation so for example, let me just give you an example. Somebody like E.J. Roy, when Roy came to Liberia, when he came, he brought goods and services, he went, but when he came to state of Liberia, when he opened his store, Roy made it emphatically clear that he was only taking United States dollar, basically. And people, he rubbed people the wrong way, they saw him as greedy, blah, blah, blah. and whatnot, but he wasn't taking it. So when we think about this, we talk about this thing from a policy level, but you also have to think about from a layman perspective. Think about the crew guys that work in the warehouses, right? These guys that work as interpreter, they work as sailors on these boats. They want some sort of value to carry back home, because this is how they get their thing when they go back home to buy land, to get
Right.
married and whatnot. Think about it. I don't want to get paid in Liberian dollar that is already not worth anything. You want something else. So in a way, that's how people started to flee to the more stronger currency, like the
Mhm.
pound sterling, like Jimmy was saying. People started to flee to more stable currency, more
Mhm.
secure currency. And that's where you see, even though it was not an official currency yet, but that's where you see people started to like actually gravitate towards the pound sterling. And because it was more stable, and, it was more secure, it felt more secure, and it was stable medium of exchange. So people started to gravitate towards that. Right. So, but yeah, from 1860, that's where our problem started from, with that Maryland annexation, right? It started from there, and we just started to snowball down the line. Where there were times where Liberia actually made a stand, but she was too
Mhm.
small. So, for example, in 1914, on Howard administration, President Howard administration in Liberia, there was a bill in the Liberian legislature to ban and to get rid of all pound sterlings, or like say for so or and in the bill actually said all foreign currencies, right? The British and the American protested. The British have protested based on the fact that. So let me just stop here. That was too fast. So the
Yeah.
pound sterling is different from the British West African currency. So at a certain point, the British issue a new currency called the British West African currency, right? That was used in their territories in other
In West
territories like
Africa.
Liberia, not the pound
Yeah.
sterling, the British West African currency, because then they developed a currency bowl now that was controlling that British West African and the Liberian, and it wasn't worth anything. The Liberian wanted actual pound sterling. Our people
Right.
were weak, but they were proud people. They said they don't want anything in Liberia called British West African currency. It would make
Right.
people think like, bro, is British, right? And why not? So they were actually against that. They stood up, but then again in 1914, the law, that was just around the wartime, right? World War I and stuff
Mhm.
like that. British and American brought pressure to bear on like Brazil. If you refuse it, then people in the other territory, especially the British, right? The people in our other territories will start to refuse their money. You can't do that. Then you lose. Then the people will lose confidence in this money, and they will not have value. Blah blah blah. And so they cajole Liberia into accepting that proposal. So that bill died.
Wow. So I think the point I want us to maybe fast forward this a little bit. So I know Jimmy talked about the first loan we got, which was the 500K, and how by the time it got to the coffers, it was only 75 grand. And I think if I can recall correctly, after that we had another 1.5 million that was put together by the consortium of British and the US, which also I think it had a lower rate, but it was meant to replace that existing loan. Um, so I want us to maybe fast forward and talk about the debt aspect of it, of how historically we've been just debt trapped, and up to now we're still debt trapped. And I think this is part of some of the reason why currently we are, we pegged our currency against the US dollar, or maybe not maybe we continue to use US dollar as a way to strengthen our weak economy as well. So can you guys maybe talk about the historical aspect of the history of the debt in the country, but maybe fast forward it up to now where we are? Yeah.
Okay, let me go, Jimmy. I mean, let me set
Yeah.
the
Please
stage for
go.
you to
Go
go,
ahead.
right? So we talk about how the Liberian dollar had devalued, right? There
Mhm.
was no confidence in the dollar. The government finances was messed up to a point, right? It was just bad, right? And they had ran up on their local credit, their domestic credit, which were those mercantile houses. So
Mhm.
it was just really bad, right? Prices were up. You can imagine. Again, we're just talking the policy, but think about what was happening to the individuals, right? The ordinary people. There was one lady said things were so expensive in Liberia, she had to go to Sierra Leone to buy milk. I got the letters here, right? So there were letters written, right, back and
Mhm.
forth, right? So she said things were so expensive. That's how bad it was. That's how bad the situation was in terms of the inflationary pressure in the Liberian economy at the time, right? And those things also influenced the politics of the day, right? So by 18, so Pin had won. Pin had won the election after he defeated won in the primary, he became president. But then think the situation did not did not improve, right? And so he went against Roy. Roy was a businessman. He understood, at least he understood the global economy as it was in terms of a business person. He has some knowledge of economics, right? E.J. Roy. And so Roy and Payne were going head to head. As you well know, he defeated Payne in 68. I mean, Payne defeated him in 1868, but then they went for a rematch in 1869, and Roy won that elections. And what Roy said was in his inaugural address was one of the way to kill these problems was to go and contract loans. So basically, guys, Roy had guys like John Lewis on his side, right?
Hmm.
John Lewis was an old pioneer, one of the people who founded the country, right? Roy had him on his side and stuff like that. So Roy had used some of his personal money to go to London, right? Because they encourage and say the country is so bad, but you got money, you rich man. You use some of your money when you finish, when you can contract a loan, and then you can pay yourself off of the loan, right? Take your money on the bottom when you can come to the country, right? So
Yep.
that's what that was the assumption Rob was operating on. So when he came to the United States, when he went to Great Britain to discuss the Northwest boundary dispute for Sierra Leone, and then he
Right.
negotiated but not that he negotiated, but he gave his blessings to the loan, the loan that eventually did sort of quote they didn't reach to Liberia, right?
Right.
When he gave his blessing to the loan for the loan, it was his own personal money when he went to when he came to the United States and met President Grant. So all those things he was doing, he was using his personal funds because Liberia was broke. Liberia did not have money. Our finances was bad. That one of the reasons he probably won the election because he said he could fix the problem, right? So he
Right.
said the way
Right.
you fix this problem to get ourselves out of this is we go and contract a loan, we deposit 25,000 in the treasury to redeem all these debt, and
Right. Yep.
redeem all the debt that floating our internal debt. Then we use another 25,000, to buy up, to strengthen the economy. And so he had a whole plan with this whole thing, right?
Yep.
But not only that, but then like how do you pay for it, right? So Liberia customs duties were pledged also, but also Roy actually increased it. Roy actually increased the tariffs, right?
Yep.
The tariffs rate on Roy in 1870. That was the legislature that passed a law that was they gave certain special rate to certain items, right? Most of the items were things that the people in the upper class were using. So you can
Right.
understand how
It
how they would
impacted.
want to get rid of him because the rich people were the one that he was trying to tax to pay for some of this stuff, right? And so that was the idea behind the loan. So this is how we dig ourselves out of this hole. Stabilize the currency, get things back to where it's supposed to be, increase trade with the interior because it's by increased volume of trade that we get more taxes coming in. The more people trade, the more money we will raise, and
We
the
can
more taxes
collect.
we're going
Yeah.
to get to be able to do. That was the whole idea behind Roy and the loan, right? But then the whole thing got politicized, right? And I hear people say Ross stole money, and the Raw only crime was, I am sorry, I'm going off tangent here with the
No, no,
Raw.
it's okay.
To
That's fine.
understand these things because it has to do with finance and economics. Because
Right.
these things is what shaped Liberia today. This one we're talking about is what shaped Liberia. Believe me, you. And so after Roy, what was I? I'm sorry.
You said they accuse him of
They
stealing.
accused him of embezzlement. Raw crime
Right.
was co-mingling, right? He
Right. Right.
co-mingled his personal money with the country's money. That was
Right.
what that from my investigation. That was the only crime there. And not even a crime, but that was his mistake by
Right.
co-mingling his own personal money with the government money, right? With the money that was supposed to come. So that's how when you go through history and you see Roy were paying himself, taking money. That was money that he had already expended on the country,
Right.
right? The guy was the richest man in the country. That was money that he had already expended on the country. He was paying him, taking his money back, and why not make it look like even the
It made it
charges.
look like it was stealing. Let me come in too. You see, Roy had a lot of ideas. You see, when Roy took office, he started a program of reconstruction, just like Percy was saying. Liberia is in a very shaky mood. Okay, we needed a economic solution because they were shaking. What happened? Our exports went down. So he said, well, let us build new roads, let us build schools in order to raise funds for our projects. So he went and negotiated the loans, but the Liberia still went through a recession, and our exports declined further. So we were unable to pay these debts that he projected we would do. So even though his ideas of expansion, building roads, building infrastructure were good, our exports still took a big hit, and that is why we started defaulting on the loans.
But Jimmy, how do you? The question was, the phrase like bro was, but how do you get out of the rut, right? How do you get out of the rut that you're in, right? You can't. The reason Roy wanted to build to engage with the interior was where the production was being done, right? If
Yeah,
we open up
exactly.
roads, if we
Right.
get
Right.
foreign investors to come here and open roads to the interior, it will be easier for people to bring things down. So
Yeah.
imagine a guy toting something on. He can bring a lot of just one man. He can bring
No,
a lot of
Yeah.
stuff to sell. But if
correct.
you open on the road, if you build more roads, you have more. Like the guy can bring more stuff to sell, and you can tax more, and you can get more revenue. So that was Roy's idea, right? To open up the interior, to engage with the interior, so that we can raise taxes and pay, our debt and be stable again. But again, that's what I said. They didn't give him the chance to do what he was supposed to do. But as far as the loan self is concerned, the loan was a private placement, right? The people that issued the loan, there was no bank and whatnot. There were two
Yeah.
guys that issued the loan, right? They were
Mhm.
privately placed, and that's what you see the terms and condition. So Libra was like a stepchild. She didn't have any backing. The same year Libra took that loan, Sarah Loon also took a loan. The same rate, the same everything. Sierra Leone took a loan, the same rate, the same everything. The difference between the Liberian loan and the Sierra Leone loan was that Sierra Leone had the backing of the crown institutions, right? It almost like me and you go somewhere, you go, your credit good, you go sign for me, I'm gonna get a good rate, I'm gonna get a good deal, right?
Yep.
If Jimmy go there, you know, spoil your credit right now, my man sketchy. I mean, game money, I'm putting out raise it, you know what I mean? And
Yeah. Yep.
Jimmy, I can get you the money. I can get you someone. Deep discount will give you that 30. I can give you the 70%. The other 30% will use it to. So that was the kind of. It was a private place loan. It wasn't like bro went anywhere and go negotiate. And plus, she didn't have some kind of international backing like the United States, like Sierra Leone had, right? So the
Yeah.
loan that was negotiated at the end of the day, that was. I know it seems messed up, but yeah, that was the best deal Libra could have in the London financial market at the time, because Libra had never been there. That was her first time. She didn't know the ropes, right? And so that was the best deal they never asked questions. And the first thing I came at two private guys, and one of them was a doctor, the other guy was a field businessman, but he was trying to log again. And Libra came and went. So yeah, they did what they had to do. And then after they gave the loan to Libra on those terms, they went and sold the loan into the public market at a profit, at an 85% markup. Can you imagine?
Wow.
Yes, that's what happened to the loan. And so that loan story is what happened, and Liberia couldn't pay, like the whole politics. You all know now. I don't want to rehash that, but that Liberia couldn't pay that debt, right?
Yep.
We defaulted for 20 some more years
Yep.
until 1899, when we renegotiated with our creditor, with the creditors, and then at a more decent rate, right? They capped the rate at 5%. Arthur Barker
5%.
was
Yeah.
Treasury Secretary at the time.
Mhm.
Garrison W. Gibson was president. So we capped
The interest rate. Right.
the rate at 6%, and we renegotiate our debt, did certain things, and then in 1906, right, we issue another 100,000 loan again to repay and to stabilize Liberia and whatnot. Same reason, same thing, and another $100,000. That loan too did not materialize. People play with it, and Liberia was on the hook for it. And then
Right.
that's when Liberia decided to turn now to the United States. So so she sent a delegation in 1909 to the United States to discuss the possibility of the United States um having to give some release. So the United
Right.
States had did a scheme in the Dominican Republic wherein private financier actually refinanced the Dominican debt,
Yep.
but they had American in charge of the receivership, and then they had a sinking fund for that would be able to pay off the debt. So that scheme that Dominican scheme was successful, right?
Yep.
And so they told the Liberians about it. The Liberians said, yeah, the American actually found a return commission also and studied the issue, made a recommendation, and then in 1912, so it have to be made clear the first two loans were denominated in pound sterlings, right?
Mhm.
And when Jimmy said 500,000, that was the equivalent of 100,000 pounds sterling. But the
Yep.
third loan, which was issued in 1912 by the United States, were denominated in United States dollars, right? It was 1.7 United States dollars actually.
Mhm.
And so that money brought, when America decided to give the loan, Great Britain protested, France protested, Germany protested, because Germany was like our biggest trading partner at the time also. All three of them protested and said, why? You're going to make us irrelevant if you start this kind of thing. Yeah, people are going to start running to you for loans with these schemes. So you can raise the money specifically just from the United States. So that's how the 1.7 million was raised internationally, but it was managed by the City Bank of New York, right, in New York. And then the receivership was set up. The members of the receivership were from each of those countries, but America had printed the receiver actually, which was an
Yeah.
American person. And so that was the nature of that 1.7, right? That 1.7 loan, and it went
But
on and on and on and on.
Percy, I just sorry to cut you off, but I think it's very interesting what you said that United States wanted to come to our rescue with loan, but the other European countries protested
Yeah, they were
against it.
protesting.
I mean, we need to understand this thing, and Gabriel. The reason why I'm saying they make sure Africa it does not receive the kind of support it needs to get out of its situation. It is almost it's oppressive, and we need to notice that there is an oppressive attitude
Hmm.
to you between European and Africa trade,
Yeah.
whereas we're not given an opportunity to emerge from our poverty.
Yeah.
Okay, imagine why would you protest? You said, well, I mean, this is a small little country, Liberia.
Yeah. Why would these big guys be protesting?
Exactly. Why would you be protesting about a little tiny country?
But
It,
yeah. It,
it Go
Go
ahead.
ahead. No, no, go ahead, Jimmy.
In the grand scheme of things,
Yeah.
it is to oppress,
Right.
to exploit and oppress Africa,
Yeah.
and that has not changed
It
till
hasn't.
today.
It hasn't. And I wanted to give this other historical context. As recent as 1990, after the war, right? When the war ended, there was a reconstruction. What's happening in Ukraine right now? You know how Ukraine went to war, and there's a $400 billion by Goldman Sachs, I think, and another bank to reconstruct Ukraine. So there's a reconstruction bank created, right, by those two banks. The same thing happened to Liberia right after the war, as well as the recent war that just happened. I think it was around probably 200 million or 400 million to reconstruct. Exactly what you said. All the other partners, the Germanys and all the other countries, wanted to give that money directly to Liberia. You know who
Mhm.
restricted that? You bet. And we never saw a penny. What they did, instead they funnel it through NGOs. That's how you saw the emergence of NGOs in our country. They didn't want to give that money directly to Liberia to craft her own future after the war, which is supposed to be a reconstruction loan to say, hey, you went through this crisis. Here is money, like they're doing to Ukraine right now, to reconstruct, to redevelop everything that you've broken. Instead, the US, I will say the US opposed that, and that money was funneled through NGOs. So I exactly this is not this is something that's continuing in perpetuity that continue to happen. So I agree with what you guys are saying. That's exactly what continued to happen. Yeah.
Go on, Percy.
Yeah, and so that was protestation, and so Liberia had to, I mean, America had to like have them on the receivership, and then she was the primary receiver, and after that, that debt still lingering until 1963, until Todman paid off in 1963, I think. That's
There was
when.
one thing I remember during that time. There was there was a we just for the receivership we offered that part of the loan was we're going to surrender the Liberia Frontier Force.
Yep.
Those days,
Yeah.
our
Yep.
army,
Yep.
the finance. They
Yep.
would take
They will
over
take
the
over
finance
our yeah.
minister effort.
Yeah.
We agreed to surrender all that to America just to get this debt.
Yeah. Right.
Hmm.
And it passed the House, but when it got to the Senate, I understand it was declined.
It was
They
declined.
didn't
Yeah.
approve it.
Right.
And so this whole package that he had designed will pass on to Firestone. You want to
That's exactly
elaborate
I
on
was
that?
going to say that Firestone was behind that. Firestone definitely wanted to take Liberia as its plantation, literally like they have the
The
Mangimi area.
plantation.
They wanted to take it. They were the one behind the making Liberia, wanting to make Liberia like put Liberia in a receivership. But I'm glad that we hung on to that and that didn't go through the Senate because that oof, that would have been a disaster had it happened. Yeah, yeah. But I wanted to maybe fast forward. I know Percy mentioned in 1963, that's when the debt was paid off, right? You said?
Yeah, when the old
Right.
man pay off.
He said it all been paid off. So in 1963, that's when the debt was paid off. But you know what was happening in at that time, right? That's when we had that boom in our economy, right? Where from the 60s, I think up to the 70s, where we had the 8 straight years of being the second fastest growing economy in the world, right? So at 63, debt paid off, fresh start, new beginning.
Hmm.
How do we get to where we are today? How do we
I'm
get
glad you mentioned that. I will let person elaborate. But
how,
remember
how do
now,
we how do we pick up from
right,
giving a clean slate, right? Well, not giving a clean slate. Well, we struggle, we muzzle our way through and be able to pay out our debt to
right.
and in that era as well, we had the second fastest growing
Stay
economy in
right
the world.
there. The
Right.
fastest growing economy. Let's and those they were compared to Japan.
Yes.
But let's examine those two economies with a microscope, and you will understand why we are where we are today and why Japan is where it are today. Is fastest growing, using
Second
your
fastest, right, in the world.
resources, using your minerals in extractive industries. Yeah, they're
Right.
taking more your gold, diamond, and timber, everything.
Hmm.
But the economy, the people, are they getting more jobs? Are more people being employed? Are they engaging more factories? Is there more production in the country, or there's simple extraction going on? Personally, I'll let you go ahead.
Yeah, and please look at it from the context of us getting into debt as well. Being in that era, which were if you talk to your mom, I argue with my
So,
mom all the time. She said that is the best era they
so,
ever
so,
lived in to get into where we are today.
I have these. I have this conversation. I usually have these strong conversations with Dr. Samuel Toe. He's writing a book on old man Todman, and
Mhm.
me and him had from the beginning we had this. We used to have these strong conversations, and I was against the Todman methodology and whatnot. But then I started to re-educate myself, like going back how these
Mhm.
things happen and whatnot. Come to find out, Todman was a Roy acolyte, right? And he studied Roy. He really liked Roy, and he thought Roy was his model. And he thought the people just interrupted Roy. Roy was the original follower of what became known as the open door policy because it's what if you follow Todman, his
Mhm.
unification, whatever he called unification, that's
Mhm.
what Roy called integration, right? Those
Right.
policies that he actually decided to do at the end of the day, the blueprint he took them from history, he took them from Roy's time, and that's how he was trying to develop those things. I mean, I'm not saying he was a perfect vessel, but like bro was on an upward trajectory in terms of the economic market. The broad up question was like Jimmy was saying, like, yeah, the GDP is growing, but are people like are the Liberian people actually feeling this growth? Is this growth trickling down to the ordinary Liberian man? That was
Mhm.
the question, right? And that was the problem with Liberia at the time in that time in space. And for that generation of people, I'm talking progressive or whoever you call them, that generation of people they had a question, they had a proposition to confront, right? Do we choose an evolutionary approach or we choose a revolutionary approach because
Mhm.
things are the way they are, right? And unfortunately, because the country was changing, and like with change is very slow, right? Evolution is a very slow process, but eventually, what actually morphed from that is actually uh, um um good for the future because it was an evolutionary process that created it, as opposed to revolution where you blow up everything and you have to start from scratch infrastructure wise and why that was for me. That's why I think the question that we have to confront after Todman, right? Yeah, Todman had he excesses,
Mhm.
right? And then there was Tolbert, who was
Mhm.
Yeah, he was not perfect vessel also, but he vacillated a lot. But we were making progress, steady progress. We would still
Right.
have our reputation intact and whatnot, right? Even though there were other forces moving and whatnot. But my thing is, eventually those old forces were going to buckle. There was signs that they were going to buckle under
Right.
the pressure. The thing is, the time was too long for people to wait for those forces to buckle, and they couldn't wait for it, and they decided to do the revolutionary part where you blow up everything, and the country come apart, and we go through this whole process of a whole generation or two into this whole war process and whatnot. So, and then the people that came after these guys that they criticized were no better. They were novices. They did not understand
Yeah.
the international
A
system.
whole lot.
They did
Yeah.
not know how government ran. And for them it was just like they had hit the lottery, right? And that's how we went back into the debt again after 63 when the old man cleared it and other people were taking the time to bid it up. The other guys them came. I mean, then we hit the lottery and they started to do what they had to do. And we bit by bit we started going and during the war years, nobody was financing debt. Everybody was preoccupied with war, and that's how it went up. And like just like 1871, the Liberian played deaf ear to the loan, and the interest rate went way up, and that's how we went right back to where we started, and then we go back to HIPIC.
Right.
I don't
But
know how
let's
HIPIC doing now.
fast forward. We were forgiving all the debt
That's what I'm
under
saying.
Right.
Clinton
HIPIC.
administration,
That's what
right?
he just said. The HIPIC, the high im- impoverished or high poor country or whatever you
Yeah,
call it. Right. That's yeah. You're
high
right,
in debt
Jimmy.
country
You're right. Highly
or
indebted
whatever,
countries. Right.
poverty, whatever.
Yeah.
HIPIC.
Right. They wiped the slate clean,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
But while we finding ourselves getting more and more indebted, and is it because we are not investing actually? All the money we're getting, we are not investing in our country. We're not investing in ourselves, right? Most of
I
these what been paying salaries and,
I think I think
mhm.
Jimmy, what's happening to the country is what we're discussing here. People have no sense of history in our country. Our leaders have no sense of history. The people that
At
govern
all.
Liberia does not have the sense of history. They doesn't know what the country have been, what have occurred, how the country turned out to be. They might be old in age, but they just doesn't have that sense of history. That's what I'm saying, right? Because anybody with a sense of history will understand Liberia history with dead,
You're right.
right? And our leader will be conscientious and very sensitive about how they indebt the country
Yeah.
because what they have made the country ought to be, right? That sense of history is lacking in today's leaders. I don't care whether you're 78 or you're 95 years old. You don't have that sense of history because if you have that sense of history, you will be very careful how you indebt the Liberian people and their children, right? And so until our leader, this might be seem like nerdy for people like what you guys been talking about, but until our leaders can sit down and painstakingly do this work that me and you and Gabby is doing here and understand these things from a broader perspective and forge policies and bring about ideas that will actually make the country better, we'll still be paying salary. I mean, we'll still be paying salary. That like or somebody told me the other day, the country is not going to change. Nothing spectacular is going to happen, and I hope they're wrong. I just hope so.
No, I don't think they're wrong, and it's not about whether they're wrong or not. It's you see what's happening, and you just know, hey, they're being honest. I think I said this on the last show. Every revenue we produce domestically, every penny of it, which like you guys said, we spend it on consumption compensation, right? The only infrastructure or what a hard infrastructure or soft infrastructure project we take on, we go to our partners and borrow that money to do that. Even the roads that we talked about, that's how we go borrow money, or we go to these, other country like Japan or these Kuwait to borrow money from them. And the money we borrow from those people are the one that we use to put on these infrastructure. Whereas we could be thinking that every revenue we raise from here, every dollar we raise in this country, let's allocate at least 10 cents or 20 cents to hard infrastructure. We don't do that. So whoever told you that, whoever you're talking to and said that the country is not going anywhere, that is, I'm not even going to argue with them. You can, since we're on the matter of debt, we can look at the where we are from a debt perspective, right?
Yeah,
like
The
you
last
said.
government added $1 billion to the debt to the
Right.
debt. The last government added $1 billion. What do you show for that $1 billion that you added? That's
Hmm.
future generation that's going to be paying that
Hmm.
your children and grandchildren are going to be paying, right?
Right.
And that's why I'm
Right.
saying people don't have a sense of history. But the first time the government started to win, started getting deals that wasn't even making sense. Igbo
Right.
math, airtone, all those things. They started getting these things, right?
Right.
And like that just showed like the callousness with which our leaders proceed, right? They don't take the time to study these things and say, okay, let's take a pause. Why are we borrowing the money? Who are we borrowing it? What are we going to do with it? And then go ahead and facilitate the process. But everybody sits in Morovia. Another problem that's killing the country also is that Morovia centric model that we have, right?
Mm.
Is archaic and needs to be changed, right? We need
Right.
to start to decentralize the country, right? So that the people cheering in that is sent down to go to school in Morovia and they have gone to school and learned, they need to go back to their parents' place. But you can't go back when the president appointing sweeper, superintendent, and everything. And that's why you see we don't have the kind of, I'm sorry I'm going off tangent. The problem
It's okay, my man.
we have a
Right.
leadership gap in the country because we don't have. Look at a guy like Moniba, right? Dr. Moniba that just ran in this going elections, right? That's a young guy, right?
Yeah.
He's running for president. The reason he's running for president because there's no legitimate entry into our ballot politics except you have to do a kamikaze stuff. You go,
Yeah.
you stunt, and
Straight
then
to
you
the
fall
top.
off, and then you come back next time, and then hopefully people remembers you and they put you back
Right.
there. But what if we had a system where we have superintendents, right, administrative head, actual superintendent, actual executives, right, in the counties, these guys that can go back there, right? Moneyball would be he will go there and prove himself, develop the people. Let's see what kind of program he can do. Let's show the man you forget what the president is. Let's see what you can do locally and originally. Let's see what you can do. And then based off of that, when you put your hand on that and say, yeah, but you saw what that guy did down there, or that man ready. But I mean, you don't give young people a chance. And then you have all these kamikaze stunts in there that have been doing elections time. And people then, yeah, the man are young man or the man too young, let him go away. But when the man 40 something year old, he says that time what his name will be in his 50s. What he waiting for? Meanwhile, we got 60-year-old coming waiting after 78-year-old Bwaka. When were the young people, when were actual people with vibrant take over the country?
You
Because we don't
see,
give them the chance to do anything.
say what you want about what you just said right now is exactly how the Chinese model operate. You start from the lower level, and your work. That's how Xi Jinping got to where he was, right?
That's it.
Efficiency, effectiveness, and he rose through that. So they don't just take you and put you there. They start you at the lower level. But like you said, there's no entry point, so you just got to just
But
shoot
look at
for the
the
top
Chinese.
and
I remember the Chinese when they
to
were
the top.
coming up back in the 70s, the 80s. The ambassador, the first secretary, the driver, all of them were on the same level.
Yep.
Nobody was big shot. Our people, our leaders want whenever they get to power, they think they have become a privileged group, not a sacrificial group,
Mm-hmm.
not somebody they think they're supposed to enjoy the more benefits than anybody else in the country.
Mm-hmm.
So they gave themselves exorbitant salaries and any kind of debt or any kind of money that comes in the country. They do not see it that they have to invest in the country so that everybody will have that trickle down effect. They see it as a way of making themselves wealthier, and that is who leading us. We cannot expect Liberia to grow and develop with that kind of mentality. With those type of leaders, we will never go anywhere because it's always about themselves. It's never sacrificial. By right, the way we in debt now, the way we can't hardly pay salaries, those legislators, all of them, supposed to be working for little or nothing now. This is the time they're supposed to make this sacrifice as an example to the rest of Liberia, but they're not interested. They're not interested in growing Liberia. And when this persists, as it continues, it will eventually, because the country is not repairing itself, so it's
At
gonna
all. Yeah.
eventually lead to the collapse of the economy.
Right.
But so when we see them, and they're making their case. They're making their I think the only thing we can do expose that these people do not want to develop the country, and we know that because we poor, we broke, but this man wants a brand new car every 3 years for
Yeah, and
$80,000.
and I
I
think
think
I think the
yeah.
people understand when you explain to them that again it's rigged. When you break things down to this level to our ordinary people, I think they understand it. I think they understand it. I think they know it. There's no reason why a guy represents a place that he doesn't have a house. He doesn't live with the people, but he only goes there during elections time,
Mhm.
right? So you don't even know what these people are going through. You don't even know their lives. You don't know what they're going through. My thing is, I think it's about time. This is about time that we decentralize the country. The country people children have went to school now, right? There is
Yeah.
no deficit in education again in our country. Liberia is not short of education now, right? The people children have went to school. It's about time you open up the country, set up a system in a way where the children can go back to them and help them develop. Because you people have been in Monrovia since 1847. You haven't done anything for these people. You want to go back there every now and then when you want their votes, right? So open up this country. Let the people children go back to them. The people children that have gone to school and willing to help their mind, power, and help their brother and sister, then let them go back to them, empower them, open the system up.
So
That way
what
you
is the
let the people have
pathway?
elections.
What
Let them elect their
That was
officials.
the
what
next
what is the
question
pathway
I
of
had.
opening? What is
That's
the
the,
pathway of opening up the country?
right.
You
That
talk
was the
about
question that I had for
decentralization. What
you.
is that path?
Um, there's a law already there. There's a decentralization law on the books already, right? Let's get to this point where the president does not appoint people. Let's start having regular elections. You see what happens when you have regular elections? People get used to it. People know that they're not supposed to be fighting and whatnot. Do what you're supposed to do, but when election time comes, I will vote you out of office. Simple
Exactly.
as that.
Right.
Let's have regular election, not only presidential and legislative election. Let's have local election. This is how you know you even a grassroots party, right? That you're not disconnected, right? That's what happened to Roberts and the other guys. They were sitting in Monrovia. Meanwhile, those guys were upbraided, they were accumulating wealth, they were getting money now, but they didn't have power. That's how they organized themselves into the true weak party and took and came against Robert and the guys in 1870. They won and they stayed there 2 years and Robert then toppled them, but they came back in 76 and they ran the show until 1980, right? So even though the Tree Party became a menace to itself eventually, but the initial purpose was good. There was an upstart against the establishment, right? Let's start something like that. Let's start having this local conversation because the president in Liberia does not know where hospitals are supposed to be built in Sino or Bon County. Only a local leader will know that. Only a local leader will say, yeah, we need a hospital here because we have the population here. We need a referral. Only a local leader will be able to do that. Only a local or lawmaker or whoever you want to call them will be able to do that. So we need to get back to the fundamental. Let the people in Liberia take care of foreign policy, national issues. But there are local issues. There are issues at the local level that the people are being the people need help with. And the people in Monrovia are not going to solve it because they don't know what the problem is. So let the people cheering that they sent to Monrovia to go to school, that have went to school, let some of them start to go back to the people and say, man, pa, let's start facing this is how things or some of them that have traveled, let my man get Gabby here, right? Let the people start, let Gabby go out and create action and start helping people put the place together. Let the people cheering go back. Let's start doing something at the low because people in Monrovia, if we keep this model here, because this model was put in place because of the model of administration was put in place because the people the settlers wanted to be swift, right? They wanted to when there was a problem, they didn't want that whole decentralization where people got to agree in Sano, people got to agree in Basso and other places before they can dispatch people there. So they said, no, we'll just make the thing central. When the decision is made here, people leave from here and go to where the problem is and whatnot. That was the intent. We're not there anymore. That's not what we are anymore now, right? So there's no
Right.
need for this kind of centralized small country that we have here. You need to open this place up so that everybody can be running for the presidency. Someone on run for superintendent to help our people. So make it possible. You know what I mean? And then when you
So
prove yourself as a superintendent, then you put your hand on there and the people say, yeah, that meant they were in Sano. They
yeah.
meant they were in Bon County. They meant they were, yeah, so he read it. You know what I mean? So you have
Yeah.
proven yourself, but you can't have unproven young people. You give them the opportunity to do anything, and then at the end of the day, they're only supposed to be behind you, running behind you, the old person, and what you can't do that. That kind of model I don't like it. That's not why I think the country should be. And it's about time that we have that argument, and that time is coming soon. Trust me, believe me, you will be hearing for some up there where that money get right. Tell me.
I have a follow up though. Since this show is about economics, I like the idea, and I agree with both of you that we need to decentralize Liberia. Monrovia is not Liberia, right? But there is the economic aspect of it. So let's say you advocating that the representatives should go to have activities in those county that they're representing or district that they're representing, the county to boil it down. But the road infrastructure that will allow, let's say, the person from Sino who went to school in Moravia who wants to go back, does not allow enough trade between Sino and the rest of Monrovia. What will you think that will be an incentive that will make them want to go back there to continue to live there if there is not the hard infrastructure, the roads that connect these other counties to each other that will make it easy for people to trade among themselves easily, as opposed to, hey, I
So,
graduate from here. There's not a lot going on here. Let me go to Monrovia where everything is happening.
so
How do
you
you solve that
do
for
what the
that?
people used to do, Gabriel, right? Let everybody do what exact, for example, what you did, right? You create a job for yourself and you create a job for other people where you I saw you brushing, and hopefully that's a farm you were brushing in at your farm. I saw you
Yes.
brushing cassava sticks, right?
Right.
Let's assume, okay, Gabriel graduated from school. Let's assume Gabriel, Gabriel goes back to his place there, the pub left for him, and he cultivates 25 acres of land there. He plants cassava, whatever he wants to plant there. In the process, Gabriel is providing economic opportunities for people, right?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
that's several families you're providing economic opportunity for. If a man can feed his family, he doesn't have to go to beg. And he can get up in the morning and go to work and do those
Yep.
things that he needs to do. It
Yep.
brings something, you're creating economic. Think about it, if you did that for 5 families
Yeah.
and each of them have 10 children. They may supporting 10 children, educating 10 children in school and whatnot. That's
Uh-huh.
10, 20, 30, 40, 50. That's 50 kids. You are a whole generation of people you're educating just by providing that one job for that one man or that
Right.
one family and stuff like that. So we need more people like me, you, and Jimmy to go back and start cultivating the land that the people have there now, right? You have the idea, you probably have small capital, or you know how to raise capital. Let's use what we have and start to create the opportunity zones that needs to be created for our people, because the people in Moravia are never going to do it. They're not going to do it,
Right.
right? So you have to go back there now. So and another thing you ask, how do we create roles and whatnot to do that? Hey, Jimmy, if you give the people the latitude to do what it's supposed to do, well, you know how to raise debt. You work in finance. I work in finance. Jimmy
Right.
has financial background, right? We know how to raise debt, right? Responsible debt now. I'm not talking about
Right.
the 8071 and the ones that have been raised prior, but we know
Right.
how to raise debt. You know what kind of mechanism needs to be in place, right? To build local roads, because the national government have to build national roads, but
Right.
local roads that take your goods from your farm to the local market
You
and
have to
whatnot
build
to
that.
bring it. You
Right.
know how to do that. You can
Right.
raise debt. It will not be as big as the national government debt, but it will be a debt, but you will see it go through as the local leaders of that place to build that road, right? You will make sure that road is built because you live in a developed society. You know how road building, how it's supposed to develop roads.
Right.
If you know where school's supposed to be built, within a population of 50,000 people, you're supposed to have an elementary school and a
Yep.
high school and whatnot. You know those things. The people in Moravia are not going to do that. It's only you by living to the place and being with the people can do that. And so that's what I'm saying. This centralized structure has all lost its usefulness, right? It's about time now we sit
Yeah.
down. I don't want to be president yet. If I want to be president, I want to prove that I can be president. I want to start small. Let me start my village work. Let me be a town chief, right? Start from the town. Let me help the town develop, fix the town first. And then I go to the city level. Let me help the city. Let's start small. Give young people the opportunity to start small and prove themselves. Instead of all these things where everybody sit down in Morovia and do cheering squad and whatnot, people actually want people to get on the ground. Our people need these things. Our people
Right.
need their children back.
Yeah. Let
Right?
me chime
We need
in.
to
Let
do
me
that.
come in real quick. Let me come in real quick. Me, I'm always my orientation is the details. You
Right.
talk about let's build a road, let's build a bridge. Well, I look at the structure. I look at where I will put my beams, I look at all my stresses. I'm looking at the details of building that bridge. The first thing to do if we're going to do this decentralization, we have to create first the legal framework. Okay, we have to.
Agree.
The first thing we have to do is we have to amend the Constitution
If that's
and,
what it takes.
and enact decentralization laws that will will begin to take place and allow people to do the different things. Next thing, it's going to require the political will of the leadership. Remember, we're taking power from the president now. We're taking from power from those in Monrovia. They have to also be willing, to push this decentralization process. So we will need their involvement. Unless the people demonstrate that they want to have this thing, they want power to come to. Sano wants to govern itself, and Bone County want to be able to control some of their revenue. All that sort of thing. Each county will have to make it known that, look, this is what we want. This is not working for us, so we want that. So we have to force the political will in Monrovia to let it go. Then we can, the devolution of power and authority. We start giving local authorities more power and the ability to collect revenues and on their own. You want to say something?
Yeah, and one of the reasons the country hasn't developed too, also there's no resources at the local level, right? These guys, for example, they take all the money and take it to Moreover. There's no revenue sharing.
Exactly.
I'm just going ahead. I know you got to do legal framework. I think there's some laws on the book about decentralization and whatnot, about taxes. But we need to revisit those things. But my point is, there's just nothing at the local level. They take all the money and take it to Moreover, and then they give peanuts to the people. They call it content development fund, social development. No, these people the people producing. Can you imagine the people in Yekepa? The people in Yekepa have to wait for social development fund and content development fund. Meanwhile, they're producing iron ores that are developing. It's being shipped out of the country and whatnot. And there's no revenue sharing mechanism in place for them to have, their share of that particular that's their wealth, and they don't have their share. You know what I mean? There's no revenue sharing. There's no incentive to even raise revenue. They're talking about, when you hear people talk about the LRA and they need to start collecting taxes from houses, no, that's not the central government. That's not the national government revenue there. That the national government should not go anywhere near property taxes. That should leave at the local level so that these places can develop. You can
exactly. Take everything from the that's one of the best places to start. You hit it on the nail. Just property taxes alone. That's one of the best places to start. If we notice where you are, I don't know what state you're in, but if you're in New Jersey, you're in New York, those states collect their own taxes. That is how they develop their places.
Not just the state, the cities collect their own taxes. The counties collect their own taxes individually.
No, even if we don't have houses there, Gabriel got a farm, right? Gabriel got to pay taxes on those farms, on the produce and everything. But you have to have some kind of revenue stream going down to the counties for these people to be able to do. You can say how you want Bear Road, how we going to Bear Road. Yeah, we'll Bear Road because we got local taxes. You can take, and you can take your income taxes, you can take the other thing, but leave us with the local taxes, share the revenue with us wherever you're producing and whatnot, and we'll take it upon ourselves and we'll bear our own roads, we'll connect our own roads, we'll bear our own schools. Try it. Let's just try that model for a change and see.
So who you said when did this model start? Who started it?
What model? The model from 1822.
It wasn't from 1822 where everything just centralized. Is that from?
So when the settlers came, they met the indigenous people, right? The indigenous people had their own superstructure, their own society, and everything.
Right.
Most of the times, one of the problems the settlers ran into where they were tipping the scale, right? So a stronger tribe would be warring against a weaker tribe, and then when you know it, the settlers would come and side with the weaker side and tip the scales in favor of the stronger tribe, and they would defeat that tribe, right? So there was always these scrimmages and stuff going on. And sometimes it was about trading issues also. These tribes that were trading with the Europeans before the settlers came, they felt they're not supposed to be restricting their trades, and why not? And so these economic problem, when they come up, the settlers have to go there and squash those things, right? Mm-hmm. So the model was, they came to a conclusion that, hey, listen, if we have to do this thing, we have to do it quick and we have to do it fast, right? So there were instances wherein a whole settler community was wiped out in Grand Bassa County by a Bassa chief, right? It took time for people to move to raise the militia from like Monrovia and wherever before they could get there. So they were wiping the old town out, right? So they said let's have a centralized, let's have a model wherein It would be swift, right? We dispatch people there swiftly. We don't have to go through local this whole local coordination where people have to agree and whatnot. So we can just do it quickly. So we just raise the militia and send people there, right? So the decision will be made at one point, and the dispatch is made swiftly so that we can quell the rebellion, whatever is going on with indigenous people at the time. So that was the idea behind what we have here.
But
This whole
not only
centralized
that,
thing.
you needed it for control at the time. They didn't
Also,
have
too.
and they didn't have the wealth of people to be able to divide that power around. It was still a whole lot of traders with and little communities that they couldn't, they couldn't. The form of government wasn't completely embraced by them. So they had problems. They couldn't do it. But when after Liberia had come together, then maybe they could start dividing up that power. But it was for control. It was for control. That's probably why they did that form of government. But now we've passed that stage.
We
We
way past that. So
we
why you still got it in place? Why you
exactly.
got 73 people and of one president and a few other people, like seriously create more opportunities, more power structure, and see if you're not going to have qualified people or steady stream of good leaders coming through the system. Do that and see. Let's just try that. Do you have any interaction from people watching? What's his name?
Yeah, we do. We have a lot of comments here. I want us to go through that. So I think to be fair, to the audience, I think we should do a follow up to the show, maybe next Saturday to talk about, because I think we didn't get into the current issue with dual currency and how that is affecting. I think we went off tangent. We stay off of that. We didn't backtrack. So maybe we can look at that next Saturday. But we have a lot
Okay.
of comments. We have a few comments here.
Okay. Then
Um,
let's do another show next Saturday. I'll be here.
yeah, let's do another show. I want us to look at the current dual currency regime that we have and how that, is, kind of limiting our ability to really take hold of our own economy. Well, I don't know what your thoughts is going to be on that, but that's, we will find out on Saturday whether you
Yeah.
agree with the dual currency that we have, or you think, we should gravitate toward a single currency. But I wanted us to get to that, but I think we got caught up in the weeds with the historical aspect. So let's jump into these comments here real quick. Um, I think Revasa had a great question. I too, I'm glad he asked that question. So he said, was our money backed by gold or other resources in the 1800? But was it did we have the gold backing back then? Do you know?
Um, not
The
necessarily.
Liberian dollar was pegged to the
It
U.S.
was
dollar.
pegged. It wasn't backed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now the U.S. dollar is was backed by gold back
It
in
was
the
backed
day.
by gold, and we pegged ours to theirs.
So
So
theirs.
technically, indirectly, yes.
Yeah.
Indirectly, it was
Indirectly,
backed, but
right? Not directly. Because we didn't have a vault. I don't even think we have gold
no, we didn't
stored in
have gold.
Liberia.
We were even struggling to get US dollar into the treasury to back the local debt, and we had all that problem. So where we taking gold
Yeah.
from?
And currently we don't have a gold reserve, right? Like,
I
how the
doubt
US
it
have.
highly. Even though we produce gold, I think, but we don't have it.
Now, wow. Wow. Okay. Um, okay.
Yes, we did.
Yep.
That's I mean, that's if you look at the history, it just we were, I don't know if you want to say we were confused or we were crazy.
We're not
Not
confused.
no. It's the economic
It's
activity
the
of the day,
economic
Yeah, we,
Gabriel.
we
activity of
we
the
went
people
from
are fleeing to safer currency.
That's
Gabby,
it. That's
was
it.
the people
The
were
traders
gravitating
looking for
towards the
something they
safe
can use
currency.
anywhere. So the British pound was strong, so they know they could go anywhere. The British Empire was huge those days,
mhm.
so they know once they got that pound was value anywhere they wanted to go, and
So
that
up
and that
until
just
1854, think about it. 1854, when political units started using their own currency, started to
Their own
restrict
currency.
those free floating currencies. So 1854, so Liberia got independent. 1847, she was in existence by 1822. So that's a whole long time. So yeah.
Mhm. So he also has, man, this guy, I hope he's still watching. He also has another question here. He said, what did the banking sector look like in in 1860? I don't even think we had central bank at the time. The central bank
No,
was
there
shut
was
down.
no
that's
central
interesting.
bank.
What kind of banks we had those days in Liberia?
So
Did we have
like
a bank?
I don't
it
think
was a
no, we
trade
didn't.
economy, right? People were mostly doing trade, keeping the money under the mattress, and they would do individual credit, maybe loan somebody else money and they pay you back. And there's paperwork between you and the person, they would pay you back, work it
Yeah.
off. But actually, as the Liberian currencies were declining, depreciating, so was the British. The British started having immense interest in West Africa, so the colonists, they started bringing in the pound sterling at the time, and then also the British West African Bank also came into Liberia at that time. Also, they started to come into Liberia. So the first kind of sort of commercial banking activity started in 1914. It started in
Okay.
1910. The British had an agent bank there, and then the British West African Bank came. After that, they came in, and then after they left, then Firestone, a subsidiary of Firestone called USTC, the United States
Hmm.
Trading Company, they came
Wow.
also. They took over what the British left there. The
Yeah,
British West African Bank
that
left there.
became a stronghold. That USTC ran
Yes.
Liberia for
So
a
yeah,
while.
so the
It
USTC
ran
were
the whole
so
country.
basically those banks was like almost like the same. They were providing banking services for the Liberian government, right? So when they left, when they folded and left, then USTC came, and then when USTC got bought by I think City in New York, then they changed their name to Bank of Monrovia, and then Bank
Yeah.
of Monrovia lasted all the way on until 1974 when the National Bank was founded.
Wait,
But
is
at least in
the
the
Bank of
beginning, go ahead.
The Bank of Moravia existed? Used to have Bank of Moravia.
Yeah, Bank of
Yeah.
I got
We should revive
my
that.
granddad took a loan from that bank to send my aunties to Bromley, right?
He paid back.
I got the paperwork here for the loan.
But
This guy.
initially the ACS
Wow.
did issue these banknotes. So for the fact that they were issuing banknotes, they had to set up some kind of office
So
Hmm.
the
that
treasury, so you have to that's why I have argued several times on the internet that the central bank of Liberia should not be involved in printing money. There's not the printing of money is not a central banking function. It's a treasury function,
The
right?
treasury some
So the
function. I
treasury with the
agree.
one that's
Yep.
the production of money in the country is the
Yep.
sole prerogative of the treasury.
Yep.
So whatever you were just saying just now, the production of money in Liberia have been a treasury function since the republic started. So that money you see coming in, that's why the treasury were the one that were producing it. So you
So
did not need a central
why
bank
did
to
we
do that.
switch? Why did we switch from there? That's but I like the name. I like the Bank of Moravia. I like that name. I think it should be
Yeah,
a bank in Liberia called Bank
there
of
was a Bank of
Moravia.
Monrovia. Like it's a
I
bank
like
I
the name.
got. You made me to show you picture of the I will send it to you personally. That's a Bank
yeah,
of
it was right there on Granada Street, I believe.
I don't
No,
know where it
the
was. I
reason
know.
why I say I like the name because I went to Ghana. There's a Bank of Ghana,
Yeah, yeah.
right? There's a Bank of Ghana.
Let's
I
start
think
a
one
Bank
of
of
the
Monrovia
biggest.
now. Let revamp it. Let get somebody invested in and start Bank of
Yeah,
Monrovia.
I like that name. I think it will create a national pride to have a Bank
Yeah.
of Moravia. But anyway, River says he said, wait. He said, wait, kill, wait, kill Roy.
It's with.
Is wait, kill Roy. We were told in school he invested. You see how history can be cruel to
Raw,
some
the
people. They
Liberian
say
government charges
they were
against
told in
Roy,
school that
but
he
nothing
invested
had
the
nothing to
country's
do with
money.
embezzlement. Nothing
Right.
in the charges had to do with embezzlement of money. And most everything was had to him, trying to stifle the rights of the people and whatnot. The case against Roy had very, very, very little to do with money business.
Yeah. So you see how then whoever wrote that book that those kids were reading in school at that time, somebody need to do a revision. This is why history is important, right? Somebody can write another book to challenge his view on that whole aspect. Maybe you can be the one to do that since you have a very good historical perspective on him. Oh, Ruth. Oh, I
I
don't
hope the
like
shoe
calling
is
people by their
refined
first name
tonight.
because
What
I
she
think it's
mean?
kind of disrespect. Um, Madam Pengba, if I hope I'm saying this, she usually busy watching us. So she said, I hope the show will get refined tonight. I don't know what she meant by that, but anyway.
Yeah, I don't know either.
So what would be JBN hallmark to remember him for? Alaji.
None the show you be
This
asking that on. They definitely show you can ask
um
that.
we will plead our fifth on our question, Ruth.
Yeah, none the
Maybe
show.
on Tough
I,
Talking Thursday.
Hey, Gabriel,
Um,
let me share. Somebody's asking about what the money look like. I'm going to share that
yes, please do.
picture so they can see what the money was looking like back in the day in 1847. I want to share that with them.
You have it.
That is what it looked like.
Yeah,
That
can
looked
you
like a
imagine
stock
carrying that in your
certificate.
pocket?
That was, believe you, that was 25 cents we're looking at right now.
Wow,
Imagine carrying $50 in your pocket with this one here.
wow. Oh yeah, the Republic of Liberia. You see, this is I keep going back to this. This is at
If
the
you look at
London
it, did
School of
that's
Economics.
August
You can't
26,
right.
1880. That
This
is
is
what the
yeah,
money
the
looked
London
like
School.
back then.
These are reason why I think we should have a museum in Liberia that we need evidence of these things. You be able
And
to
the
go out
sad
and
part
you
about
check
it is these
out
things exist. They
right.
exist. It's out there in other people's countries. And these things are all available. They
Yeah.
exist. All these things supposed to be for Liberia, but they exist in other countries.
Yeah, this is from the courtesy of the London School of Economics, LSE.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Wow. That is insane. All right,
Yeah.
let's go back to these. Let's go back to this comment. Wow. In Boston here we have the Museum of Science, right? If you go to the Museum of Science, it's like you can see the nuclear history, the invention of the nuclear history, but also the 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 math, the origin of math through
Hmm.
history, right? You can see those things. So if you never really understand, we could do the same thing in Liberia, with our,
Hmm.
history, with
But
all the culture, all the
it goes back to
tribe, all
what we
the
were just
origin.
talking about. The people in
Right.
Monrovia will not do that. You have to go back to your people there and tell them we need to keep these things there. We need to bake it. Anything can make money from it. You bring all the old collections you use from back in the day. We
Yeah,
keep
what
it
is
in
the one
there.
they used to
People will
fight
come
with?
see
Right.
it. They will pay all money. You have to
Right.
carry those things to your people, Gabriel. The people in Monrovia for 100 and how much years now? 78, 79, almost
75, 77
176.
years. Right.
Yeah, they haven't done that, so they're not gonna do it. They're not concentrating on that. It's you now have to go back to your people and tell them, say, listen,
Yeah.
all the the thing you or my grandpa, whoever you gotta put it
You know,
somewhere. People can't see it, they'll pay money to all.
Percy mentioned that we at one point we started using the West African currency. This is what it looked like. And these are the places that it was circulating at. It wasn't, instead of using the pound sterling, the British people created this West African
African, yeah, the
currency.
West African
They were
currency, yeah.
used in Nigeria. I can see Ghana, Sierra Leone. So we began when this currency was began to circulate, it's began to influence our trade and economy, and eventually we
It
started.
became a currency union in a way with the rest of the British West African colonies when they introduced it in Liberia.
Okay, so we
So
have another comment here from Sam Waller.
that is the problem. Instead of going back to
Yeah,
initiate
he said
doing the
that is a
effort,
problem. Yep, go ahead if you want to read it. He
changing
said
the
instead of going
plan,
back to initiate it or join the effort by to bring forward the change you desire, you pivot to start complaining about the obstacles. Who is supposed to clear the obstacle for you?
I think we've been talking solutions here. I don't know what he's talking
Yeah,
about. We've
yeah,
been talking
yeah.
about decentralization, so I don't know what
Well,
he's talking about.
I think one time I mentioned that will the political lead in Liberia allow us to do these things, and he said, well. That's when I think he said, well, you go there and initiate, join the effort, and don't
Okay,
complain
okay.
about the obstacles that are
Right, right.
that are there. I
Right.
think that's what he
And
was
I think
alluding.
Percy has been doing a lot about saying a lot about that. Every time I bring it up, he will say, "Hey, this is why you need to go to your people and do such and such and such." So
That's
yeah,
right.
I will
That's right.
admit
Percy's been
I've
good at
been the
that.
one to say, "Hey, this one is this." I think I talked about the inaccessibility of roads, and he said, "Hey, you have to. This is what you need to do." So, Sam, I've been the one who been posing those obstacle in terms of um, if you work in finance, you tend to be a little bit pessimistic. You don't trust
Yeah,
numbers.
yeah.
You don't trust. Yeah. So it's a innate thing. I will admit to that. So, um, you know. I'm still developing my optimism. It'll come, but hardly. Um, so Sam again, yeah, he said we're very off topic. I agree with you. And then this one is from Eleanor, Miss Davis, Madam David. She said in 1847 was Liberia using dollar and coins, or they was using something else, or were they using something else? Please explain. Um,
So
I think you did that already, right? But go ahead.
um
All right.
was Liberia using dollar or coin, right?
All right.
The Liberian leaders at the time, at the founding of the country, was very skeptical about paper money, what we call paper money. Like
But Jimmy answered
they were
that.
afraid that those things can go out of hand. So
All right.
they were very skeptical about it. Jim Springsteen wrote a whole essay on that. Um, can talk about it another time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they were using all kinds of stuff. We are using pounds, shillings, and pence, and the
They were using
kisi.
notes issued by the ACS, of course. Is that you,
Uh,
Jimmy?
yeah, Jimmy
No,
responded to
that was
his question.
I responded to somebody who asked that question. What were we using in 1847? I said, well,
The
the
Bank of
first kind of
Monrovia
currency
used to
we're
be
using were those
on
notes
Warren Street, now
that
Ministry of
issued by the
Transport.
ACS.
Aha.
And then
Somebody
when
say it
they
used to be on
declared
Warren Street.
independence, that's when we they introduced the Liberian dollar.
Yeah. So did somebody Henry Doza, the Bank of Monrovia, used to be on Warren Street, right? Which is supposedly now the Ministry of
Yeah, Warren Street. That's where he's right. He's right.
yeah. Okay.
It was on Warren Street.
Yeah. Henry, thank you. Thank you. Great comment.
Area Montreal ball.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That bank need to be revived, man. I like the name and the I don't know how it went bankrupt or how it got dissolved, but you know. Um all right, I think this is the last one. You said there is a national museum on
This thing
really?
all that get joke in. You not see museum before, yeah.
He said there's a national museum on Broad Street and these artifacts are there. Really? Is that right?
It
Can
used to be.
is
I
this
didn't all not from that bureau.
I, I'm confused. Is this true or is it BS and I'm
Yeah,
That
wrong?
there
man
was
talking,
a
you think a foreigner ain't talking to, yeah.
Sam, come on, don't do that to her, my man. Why are you doing that?
He just feel all from with foreigner, yeah. And that bring people that he talking to.
I think that concludes that's all we have for comments. And later on, I think earlier on we just had a lot of
I'm going to show it to you. I know what Sam Waller is talking about, and let me just show it to you real quick here. The Liberian National Museum, where it was. I'm going to show it to you in a minute. I think it's still there. I don't know what all is still in it, but here it is.
I think it's a good source of revenue though, especially for the local
it's
level, you know.
it's tourism. You
It's
can
a
There
tourist
it
attract.
is. That's the
attraction, right?
National Museum of Liberia.
Ain't that the law library there?
I don't know.
Law
I go
Library.
to
That was the National Museum of Liberia.
I don't know. I wouldn't
Okay, maybe
if
they've
if it
converted
was
it.
It's
I wouldn't know honestly.
this place
Uh,
look. I'm seeing a monument down there, so it looks like the pavilion. It looks like the executive. I mean, the Centennial Pavilion behind the
maybe
Centennial
there
Pavilion.
is.
Then that would
No,
be
it's behind it. The Centennial Pavilion is behind this street. This is Broad Street.
yeah. Then at the law library here. Then
Okay. Okay. It was necessary in the heart of Nigeria. It stands at a permanent investment in rich tapestry. And let's see. Through the decades, the museum has been a custodian of a natural. Since
so.
1897, the old Supreme Court building has been its home. It was the old Supreme Court building,
But where is it? What part?
and that is
What
where
is
they
this? Is on Broad
converted
Street,
to the National Museum.
and this is on Broad
Broad
Street.
Street. Yeah, this is
What part of
Broad
Broad
Street.
Street?
The next time in Liberia, I will
Yep.
check it out to confirm what Sam
Okay.
was saying. If it's
What part of Broad Street is
So
this?
once it was ensconced within the grandeur of the first executive mansion, the
That's
museum
the law
owes its
library
genesis
there.
to the visionary stewardship.
Okay,
Yeah.
so he doubled down on
So it was
on
commissioned in
his statement.
1958.
He said he was there in 2 years ago. So he's doubling down on what he said to say that is true. Well, just thank you. Next time I'm in Liberia, I'll personally want to
Jimmy,
check it out.
isn't this the law library on Ashmore Street now? I mean, not on Ashmore, on Broad
Uh-huh.
Street. Sorry.
He said $10 to get in.
Yeah, yeah.
Yo, this
One
this
one of
guy,
our
this guy, this guy
callers
is too
this
much.
is actually Ashland Street.
I apologize,
Allah.
Sam.
He said we should
Sam
apologize
Waller,
to him
Sam
because
Waller is an
he
ardent
said
follower
I
something.
of
apologize, Sam.
FOL.
But I think this is the old law library there on Ashmore Street, maybe.
Allah. Okay, Sam, we apologize to you, and
I
we will go
apologize, Sam.
next time we're in Liberia. I will go
It's a
check it
ten
out.
bucks to get in. What thing I'm going to see for my 10 bucks? It will be worth it.
That's a lot of money in Liberia, yeah, by the way.
And
Um,
then you go show me organ.
no, but if we have those artifacts that we talked about, like the that's rod, what do you call it, the kissing
And
pound?
that's one of the things I said. Let's get rid of the information arm of the Ministry of Information, right? And just have culture and tourism. Let's focus on culture and tourism, right?
Mhm.
The information arm of that ministry doesn't serve any purpose nowadays. Just for people standing and talk foolishness. You can do that by having one spokesman to each ministry instead of having a whole group of people. So let's focus on the culture and tourism side of things, right? And get rid of the information side, even though the man I minister now, I'm my old teacher, Jeremy Pia, but I'm sorry, you need to get rid of information and you know what I mean, and just have culture and tourism because
Well,
this
you
is where you
can
can
talk to
generate
your
new
prof.
tourism.
That's
Yeah,
what I was
That's
just
the
gonna
the
best
prof
say.
contact you
understand.
have.
Call the prof and say, hey, this is where we think we should,
I'll be
bring a
putting the
little bit
prof
of
on a
value.
job. I can't call you and tell you nothing.
Huh? What you say?
I said I'll be putting the prof on a job. I can't call you and tell you nothing.
No, it's just whispering in the ears. Sometimes seed take roots.
No, when
It's
the
not.
time comes, we advocate those things,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it's just obsolete to have a ministry of information when you can have a spokesman for a ministry to do the same thing. So you
Well,
got
that
Kula
argument
Fofana,
has
then
been
you get Jeremy Pia. How many information dissemination we need?
It's just political. They're just
it'll be
politicizing
interesting.
it. That's it. Yeah. But gentlemen, I think we went. Percy, hopefully you can make time for us tomorrow. I mean Saturday, next Saturday. I think we didn't do a service to the audience because we really wanted to go into the dual currency and at least for me, I want to understand, you know, different perspectives in terms of what your takes are in terms of what the current regime that we have, the dual currency that we have, whether it is serving Liberia or when it was inactive for whatever reason, whether this is the era that we need to break away from it and venture out in a single currency. And we can look at the pros and cons. I'm glad we are able to look at the historical context of how we I don't know if you want to call it muzzle our way through different currency. We move from the British pound, we come to the US and and the trade aspect of it that we talked about. But I want us to fast forward now post war and to really look at this regime that we're in, the dual currency regime that we're in. What are the plus and minuses, the pros and cons, and how can we forge a way forward? Or maybe I think this is for me personally, I think this is a way the era that we need to move away from it. But I would like to hear your thoughts on it so we can have a deeper conversation about that. Because I think I wanted us to do a one take, but we didn't get to that aspect of it. So um
Yeah, I mean, give you another topic for the next show. Yeah, we can talk about that.
yeah.
Yeah, we can talk about that. Like the whole central banking thing. Like again,
Yes.
my whole idea about decentralization instead of just having a central bank here, we can have
Right.
branches in other counties to facilitate economic activities. Those kinds of stuff. You can just have
Let's
everything be Monrovia, right? Even
yeah.
if we're gonna move away from the United States dollars, let's you know,
Yeah. So yeah,
It'll
I
be-
think that would be a great topic. So we'll look at dual currency and the central bank and its role in
President,
the country.
President is Sam Waller is advising you to contact them quickly. Contact
Yeah.
Jeremiah
who I
P.
should contact.
Jeremiah, your prof.
Jeremiah, your prof.
Yeah. Yeah.
Lima Provo,
Strike
tell you.
when the rod is hot, or when the iron is hot. That's what he's saying, technically. But other than that, it was a great conversation. Great having you. I want to hear. Let's hear your final thoughts before we wrap up. I know there was a lot we talked about, so I want to hear your thoughts on it. Like, if there was one thing you want to leave with the audience based on what we talked about, what would that be?
Well, what I want to leave with the audience is that Liberia is an old country. We've been in existence longer than some of the biggest, the most known European countries today. Like Germany, when Liberia gained her independence, like Germany was not even a full country, like a republic as we know it now. So we've been an old country. We've been in existence for a long time. We have persevered over a long time. We need to cherish what we have and come together, right? Try to make this country a better place, try to restore our reputation in the community of nations, right? Be it through um, doing the right things, right? I mean, we talk government, but people to people relationship also we need to develop, we need to improve on that. There's no work like home. I just at the beginning of the show I told somebody as I initially stated, I would spend the same amount of time I spent in Liberia, but spend it in the United States, but I still feel Liberian more than anything. And I love my country, and that's why I endeavor to study it and study the history. Even though I'm a financial expert, but I like to do the historical part of things, so that by studying these things and having a good understanding, it will bring clarity. It will bring better. We can have a better discussion as opposed to just on conjectures and stuff like that. So
Yeah,
that's why I want to leave with you. Try to understand your country better. Try to understand the people who made policies and the people who came before them and
yeah,
whatnot. And so we can have a whole a rich country, so to speak. And that's why I want to leave with the audience.
yeah. Jimmy, thank you. That's well said.
That's wonderful. We always ask why. We cannot expect to do the opposite and expect Liberia to all of a sudden be great. Each one of us have a duty and responsibility. We don't, just like what Preston was saying, we don't even have to be president. But what we do know, what we do have to do, each one of us have to lead by example. In other words, if you want to see the community changing, what are we doing to change it? We have to support community development projects. We have to identify projects that we can support. We have to also educate and empower. The knowledge that we give, that we share, will help other people formulate their idea and actions. Okay. And also we have to be advocates for change. We have to always talk about the changes and how it can impact us, even if they're not doing it, or doesn't stop us from continuing to talk about it and
Hmm.
participate in community events. And last of all, we have to always support our local businesses. Liberians cannot thrive if we do not support ourselves. That is something I believe I heard the president mentioning. It had to be, for that to come to fruition, we have to support local businesses. That's the only way Liberia will grow. And whatever we need to do to empower our artisans, our business people to grow, we have to do it. That is how Liberia will change. It is us who will make the change.
Yeah. No, thank you both. For me, I think you guys said it all. I enjoyed the conversation. One thing I want to leave with the audience is that, hey, I think I always say this on here. There is a reason why we have these conversation on here. I know most other shows is the politics, the hooplas, but as I always like to tell people, economics, finance affects everything around you, whether you like it or not, whether you play deaf ears to it, it impacts everything around you. It impacts who you marry, how long you live, you know, how you speak, everything, how, it impacts everything around you. So for us talking about these things that impacts people's lives in the country, especially from an economic standpoint, that most people don't like to have that conversation about. I think that's I enjoy having this conversation and hearing different perspective and help trying to help shape the narrative of what the country could be. So we will be here next Saturday. We're going to have a great discussion with this next Saturday. We're going to talk about the dual currency, and we're going to look at the role of the central bank. So we're going to merge or try to marry the two and make sense of it, and maybe see how we can chart a different path from this dual currency regime, because Liberia is freaking expensive. So there got to be a way forward. So I hope you had a good time watching. Thank you for your participation and for the comments, the opinion, the perspective, and we will see you here next Saturday at the same time. Uh, Ciao.
Thank
We
you guys.
are Labira. Labira is our home. Labira people. Either you raise it or we want. Labira, oh. Either you raise it or we want. Labira, Labira.